scary stories. About 2 years ago, today, I recently moved to a new city in Canada. I was 21 at the time and single, as I just got out of a shitty relationship, so moving was a fresh start for me. In a new city, where nobody knew really, except my one guy friend, who we will call Mike. Mike didn't live directly in the city though, but we hung out a lot. Since I was single in a new city, I downloaded Tinder. Everyone my age has this dating app, or hookup app really. I don't usually do dating apps, but I was bored and was looking for a little fun. Remember the I don't do dating apps thing once you reach the end of this story. This is the exact reason I don't ever go on them anymore. So, I get on there and I match with a guy, who we will call Andrew. So I didn't message him first or anything, because I was doing a lot of swiping. And honestly went on with my day doing other things, as I just moved and needed to unpack. So a couple of hours later I check my phone, and I see Andrew has messaged me several times saying hi, complimenting me, and he even sent a funny pickup line. I always appreciate a good pickup line, as I have a good sense of humor about mostly everything, and don't take many things that seriously. Keep this in mind too. So I replied, and we got to chatting. He eventually asked for my number, so I gave it to him. It was fine from there, really. Nothing weird was said. So he asked me out to dinner and a few drinks. I agreed, and we met 3 days later. We met in a public place, obviously. I saw him outside the restaurant leaning on his car. It was a really nice car. He asked me to take a photo of it with the sun setting in the background. I said okay, sure. Thought it was random, but whatever. We go inside and eat dinner and drink a little bit, and it was a really good date. So I invited him back to my apartment to keep the night going, I guess you could say. It wasn't super late and we were really hitting it off. We get to my door and I was a little bit tipsy as I drank 3 glasses of wine. I wasn't drunk though, but I kept forgetting my code to my door. So I had it on my phone and I got us in. The rest of the night wasn't weird at all. I woke up beside him the next morning, majorly hungover, and we obviously had fun the night before. He left and all was good. I really didn't want to pursue anything further, so I texted him and said, "Last night was great, but I'm not looking for anything serious right now." And he freaked out on me saying I was wrong for leading him on, and whatever else was said. Okay, fine, fair. You can have your opinions. That's by all means fine. So I ghosted him. Just didn't really feel like talking anymore after that. As he said degrading and subjective things, I left it at that and moved on with my life, as we all would. About a week goes by, and I'm out running errands to finish the last details of getting my apartment furnished. I come home, and he's sitting in my living room with flowers and a bottle of wine. I was drinking at dinner. I was immediately like, "How did you get in here?" As you need a key fob, and obviously a door code. The door code thing, after I thought about it, did not surprise me. He remembered it as I had it in and out in my open phone. But the key fob I was confused about, how he got the extra one I have. He admitted to taking it when I was asleep, when he stayed the night. I was really mad someone would do that after not knowing someone for like 16 hours in person. So I kicked him out, and I was a little shooken up about the situation. I blocked his number immediately after he kept apologizing. I just couldn't forgive him after doing that and invading my home, which is a safe space. Fast forward again to 2 weeks later. I was on a little getaway in Seattle with my friend Mike. I posted Instagram stories on the trip, and I forgot until after he followed me. We matched on Tinder. This is a common thing guys my age do on Tinder. So he knew I was gone for a weekend. Mike and I are coming back to my place to drop bags off and chill for a little bit at the apartment. I walked into my apartment with Mike this time, and Andrew was on my couch with a girl. I was completely in shock he got in again. The girl even had the audacity to say, "Who are you and why are you in Andrew's apartment?" I lost my mind on both of them and asked him how in the fuck he got in again. He had no made-up story this time. He just flat out didn't know what to say except, "I didn't know when you'd be back, so I've been staying here with this bitch." Mike was mad as fuck about the situation as I told him all about it weeks ago. I demanded to know how he got into my apartment again. He said he made multiple copies of the key fob after he took it. My heart completely sank, and I threatened to call the cops if they did not get out of my apartment, and gave me every fob he copied. I was pissed and felt so invaded of my space. About a month goes by, and I was still thinking about it every once in a while. He was blocked on every social media I could find him on. I thought he was gone until I randomly saw him places, more and more frequently, like it wasn't a one-time thing. I saw him at least 7 times, and I was in public every single time. The last time, however, I was walking the seawall alone, and it was getting kinda late and dark out. It was about 9 p.m. in the beginning of June, and I stopped to tie my shoe, and when I stood up, he was right there. I fucking panicked because I genuinely felt threatened by him at this point. He kept asking why I ghosted him, didn't accept him coming around anymore, and how I could be so mean to someone who he was so into. He kept trying to grab my arm to talk to me and started yelling. I was in tears because his next moves I had no idea about. Someone thankfully heard and intervened. I told them I was not okay, and they called the cops. He obviously ran, and the police asked me to identify him. I gave them his name, and they couldn't find anyone with that name. So now it felt like me wondering if that was even his name. I remembered I had a picture of his license plate in my phone. He had a nice car and wanted me to take a picture of it with my phone as the sun was setting behind him. Douchey, I know. So I gave them that information, and they told me the plates weren't even registered. So now, I'm mind blown by the whole thing and very confused, even a little worried. They couldn't do a whole lot with what I provided, but they said they would update me if they find anything, and to contact them if he gets into my apartment again, or if I saw him out. I never did, thankfully, but to this day I'm always looking over my shoulder for that stalker. I have since then moved, and haven't seen him again. So to the guy who broke into my apartment on more than one occasion, let's not meet again. This happened my freshman year of college. Tinder was new and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all of the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye. We will call him Walter. I swiped right on Walter and we matched. I was excited and kinda giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me and I got butterflies in my stomach. We message on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. I asked him what he did for a living, and he asked what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked for my number so we could text each other instead of message on this app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversations and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the fourth day of conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversation. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first meet needed to be in public. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day he apologized and said he understood we needed to meet in public, so we made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off, and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mom wasn't feeling well and needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed, and he said, "Your mom's a big girl. If she needs you, she can just call you. Just come over, and you can leave whenever to go help her. I really want to see and kiss you." I told him no, and that I would be staying with my mom that weekend, and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually did go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and the text started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry. Please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you going to come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. And then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying he was sorry, and that he missed me, and that he wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly, the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder, asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom. How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "Well, I checked your Tinder, of course." Tinder doesn't tell exact location, but he has a within 1 mile message. This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back and said that he was being really creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him now apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, and so we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolates. Please forgive me." I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside of any of the doors. I'm assuming he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, phone number, deleted Twitter, and never been back on since. I've seen him once out and about in town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you ever read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy I find attractive. In 2015, when I was 20, I was using Tinder a lot. Sometimes I would go out with a girl and we wouldn't connect, or I'd get stood up. I went to meet up with some friends from IU in Bloomington for a weekend of just hanging out and enjoyment, and I figured I might meet a nice girl and hang out and get to know. I don't remember the girl's name particularly because we matched and we had talked for about a day and decided to hang out at her apartment that evening. I told my friends I was going to go out to her apartment, which was only 5 minutes away from their place. I got in my car and put my GPS on and made it to the apartment in a few minutes, texting her and asking which apartment door was hers. I walked around the open complex searching for the right numbers until I got to her building. I texted her to meet me at the door to let me know, and because I was sure I was at the building, she said okay, and I stood outside waiting for about 5 minutes. Let me just say that it is about 10 o'clock in the winter. I noticed something as I looked at my phone. Waiting to a window with blinds from the bottom floor opened up with what I could assume was 4 different people staring at me. I texted this girl asking where she was, and she had told me the door to her building was open and her apartment was the first on the right. I walked to the door and was surprised it was unlocked as soon as the door to the complex was shut. I turned to the left and I heard from behind the door someone say, "Shh, he's outside the door." At that point I realized the door I was at was the same one with the people staring out the window at me, and I got a gut reaction to leave, or something was going to happen to me. I walked out of the complex and went by the window, which I noticed the lights had been shut off, and I ran to my car and got out of there as fast as I could. As I got back to my friend's place, I explained to them the situation, and they didn't really take it seriously as I did. As the night went on, we had a few beers, and before I went to bed, I got a text saying, "Where did you go? I've been waiting for you." I blocked the number and went to sleep. So if you have ever used a dating site, always meet in public. To whoever that was, let's not meet. This all happened when I was 19. I'm not the best looking dude, so I've never had much luck with women, and I've ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either, until like the 3rd month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never message more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours from me by car, but I had to admit I really did like her quite a bit, and had been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while now. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to go see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. We had a video chat every other week and called most days. I just assumed I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there, though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, and making sure I was still coming. At some points when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she sent a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I had chalked this up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding the house at first. The directions she gave were pretty much confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midway when I came onto an old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in the front of the garage. I took my phone out and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of the second floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and then, so I ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans when I asked her about her dad. "You didn't tell me your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise, or—" Katie looked seriously confused and told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act and told her that she didn't have to keep pretending and that I had seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said that we had to get out of the house right now. We both ran out of our car, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I had seen the guy last. He was looking at us from out of the window again. I got a better look at him, and he seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we saw him again. The police took half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping our doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it had been had ran out into the woods, but the cops were sure the house was empty. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in her house alone right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was the room next to the one the man had been in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she never used. I told her it was fine, the man's gone, but she insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out. I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of the doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was just pissed off. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door. And there he was. The guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what had happened and called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told Katie and me that it'd probably been a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Me and Katie said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at her friend's house, and I was going home. I left a little after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him about what had happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, something caught my eye. That fucking man was standing at the corner of the house, just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie, and she said she was going to call them again. I don't think Katie ever even went back to that house alone.